I'm Bethany Collins. I'm originally from Montgomery, Alabama, but I've been in Chicago for maybe 6 years now. And since we're dating, I'll tell you, I like to watch Real Housewives too in my downtime. I tried to get Allie to watch it with me one time and she was not game, but there's still time.
Does not sound like Allie.
She wasn't game.
Like me.
She wasn't game, but like Salt Lake City, that's all I'm saying, Salt Lake City. So I wanted to share.
I haven't gotten in there. Oh. Yeah, go. You do your thing. We'll talk Housewives later.
I wanted to share a few images of like recent works and then the work that's in the auction. I'm going to try and share my screen. Yeah, all of my work is that working? I think that's working.
Yeah, you got it.
Yes. All of my work is language-based. Language is the subject and my material. I'm interested in the binary nature of language, like its capacity to do almost anything. And in also in the ways that it's like bound to fail because we created it and we're human, it's going to fail. So capacity and failure. This work is, I mean, for someone who uses language in everything, I hate writing, but this is my book. This is my hymnal that I made. It was one of the first works that I made after the 2016 presidential election intentionally. So it's made up of 100 versions of My Country 'Tis of Thee that were written from the 18th to 20th centuries. This used to be a much more common early American practice where you would keep the melody, a like known melody, consistent, and then different people would rewrite the song for different political social causes. So My Country 'Tis of Thee gets rewritten at least 100 times for suffrage, temperance, tons of prohibition. We were obsessed. Labor, the Confederacy has their versions, abolitionists and the Union Army have their versions, all of the same anthem. So I bound those 100 versions together so that they must forever abide one another in dissension, 100 versions. And then I burned the musical notes away because that's the thing that's holding all these contradicting versions of what it means to be American together in unison. That's gone. And just the differing lyrics remain. What's also nice about this piece is, and probably frustrates registrars and museums sometimes, is that you know, the burn of the page, it will shift if you let people actually turn the pages. Their fingerprints will be left across the book, but also that you know, those musical notes are now gone, so their absence gets tangled up between the pages. So the more the text is read, the more it kind of aids in its own destruction. So that sense of destruction and deconstruction and residue is also in this work, also newer after the election. This is Do You Know Them, 1898, and it uses classified ads published by formerly enslaved people right before the end of the Civil War, all the way up until the 1920s. So I'm looking very much at the 19th century over and over again in my practice. 1963, 1863, all the way up until the 1920s. So 60 some odd years, people who were formerly enslaved would post these ads with everything they could remember about their family, everything they could remember. Maybe it was like a scar, their name, and every nickname they might have gone by and might go by in the future, the plantation where they lived, a former owner's name, their children's names, everything that would fit within this small classified ad. And those ads were then published across 6 Black newspapers across the US. What's also interesting about these works is not everybody could read, not everybody got the newspaper. And so ministers would read them from their pulpits in the hope of uniting family who had been separated before the war or during the war or even after. The process here is a blind embossing, and that's important for the work because I made this piece after the US, the family separation crisis at the US-Mexico border, so pretty recently.
And
Bethany, so I embossed the works twice.
I was just gonna say, will you explain a little bit about blind embossing? And I will just chime in to say that knowing your work pretty well, the pictures are beautiful and your words are making me almost tear up, but I want to tell our audience like how physical they are in person, the tearing of the paper and the blind embossing. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's a university and a church in Philadelphia that I think is digitizing a lot of these ads. And so I was looking specifically for ads from the 1890s, which is considered the nadir, like the moment it gets worse for us after Civil War, US race relations, that's like the worst decade, ads from that year. So when it's the worst, we're still looking for our family. And then I took those ads and grouped them by when they would repeat a phrase, like, do you know them? Have you seen her? Can you help me to find my people? And then take that ad and engrave it into an acrylic plate backwards. And then when you wet a piece of paper and soak it long enough, it becomes, it becomes fibrous and malleable. And you can place that wet paper onto the backwards engraved text and run it through a printing press. It then forces the paper into the grooves of the text. And when you lift it up, it's like a Braille, but still English. It's still legible for me. So it's hard to read. It's hard on the eyes, but that's intentional. Like if you get close to this screen, you can probably still make it out, but it's also inkless. So there's a kind of haunting there and not there quality to it. But I blind emboss it twice. And the second time, the paper's fragile. So it doesn't hold up as well the more you do it. The more you repeat the mistakes of the past, like the thing falls apart, which was a lot of what I was thinking about over the last 4 years. It's like when we keep repeating the same kinds of mistakes, what happens to the institutions that we hold? In this case, family. What happens to that? I will say though, before we look at this last piece, that the paper is stronger than it looks. Like once it has broken, it dries and it will stay that way for the remainder of its life. It's stronger than it seems. Yeah.
Oh, as are we all, my friend.
Hopefully. And then this is the work that's in the auction. This is The Rose is Blooming Still. So this piece and the series was made in 2020 intentionally. And it's based on florography, which is a project Allie and I worked on together. Florography is the language of flowers. It was enjoyed a resurgence in 19th century Victorian England. It's like really popular. It's kind of a novelty gag gift sometimes that you would give these flower dictionaries. But the idea was, if I gave you a bouquet of flowers, if you translated it using your own little pocket flower dictionary, then it could make the sharing of covert messages a bit easier. Like late 19th century, early 20th century, there's at least 98 little flower dictionaries in circulation in the US. So people were translating their flowers. For instance, though, I was using these flower dictionaries again from the 19th century to translate the official state flowers for the United States. So for instance, Alabama's state flower is the camellia. It means, it's so Victorian, my destiny is in your hands, right? It's so romantic. Like now a yellow rose means I want to be your friend. The camellia, my destiny is in your hands. Delaware's official state flower is the peach blossom. It translates to I am your captive. Louisiana's iris means I burn for you. So there's a way in which the history of the US can be told through these kind of translations of our floral emblems. These things we have agreed represent us, in this case, flowers. If you translate them, that you can know a people through the landscape and what the landscape means. That's the idea behind florography and my interest in it. This series, Rose Ballad series though, I chose 19th century, again, ballads from the Library of Congress Songs of America collection. So songs that are supposed to tell us who we are together. And then I narrowed the collection down to only those songs that were using rose motifs. So the rose is the national flower of the US. And its meanings are really varied depending on the type of rose, very specific type of rose. Anywhere from, you are all that is lovely, meet me by moonlight, you are cold, there is nothing to hope or fear, love is dangerous, you have listened to scandal, right? They kind of range it's a wide gamut of meanings for the rose, national flower. Then the charcoal drawings on top of these rose ballads are reference 19th century American romantic painters who were grappling with the impending Civil War, and that shows up in their work. So they were feeling incredibly anxious and a bit doomsday about the future, this kind of moment we've repeated again of extreme divisiveness. That shows up in their paintings through turbulent landscapes, stormy skies, choppy seas, boats collapsing, that kind of imagery, some sort of wounded tree across the horizon. And so the charcoal drawings reference that kind of emotive quality of storms or destruction, of tumult. They were a way for me to evoke the last 4 years and the anxiety, but also the violence of the last 4 years too. I think the charcoal drawing does a lot of that work. And so what I hope the work does is like tie all of the beauty of the landscape and the rose as like representative of us to our violent national history, recurring violent national history.
Oh,
The florographic works are always about love letters. The rose songs are so, I mean, they're flowery, but they're as much love letter as they are indictment. And that's the same is true for these two. Did I hit 10?
oh my gosh, Bethany.
Hit
I'm
10.
astounded. Yes, no, you were phenomenal. And I will just say that for me, what has been so powerful about kind of getting to know you and our work together, and I was just texting with someone who's watching, who's like, I'm learning history. And I do learn history with you. And I think you have this incredible power to kind of bring that history up to the present in a way that is an indictment. And also in some ways, I hope, a kind of specter of hope. In that as we learn not perhaps not to repeat. The work is beautiful and powerful and very, very physical. So hearing your process is such an important part of understanding the final practice. I wish we could talk for days, and I'm very, very grateful that the ICA auction has kind of reunited us. So lots more to come with you, and thank you so much, Bethany. It's really good to see you.
Thanks, Bethany.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.